नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स. So today we continue to study the book 8 and the part 2 of the Buddha and His Dhamma. And as we have seen in the previous classes, that this particular part 2 is about the humanity of the Buddha. And Baba Ambedkar has given a detailed sort of view of the Buddha's great compassion. And as we know from the previous classes, the Buddha is known as the Mahakarunik, the great compassionate being. And his compassion, as we have seen, was boundless. And he was, as Baba Ambedkar has described him, a consummate healer of sorrow. So he was somebody who healed the sorrow of the people, and he was the highest embodiment of somebody who would heal the sorrow of the humanity. And today in this class, we are going to study subpart 3 and subpart 3, because here Baba Ambedkar is mentioning about Buddha's concern for Sikh. So concern for deceased or the Sikh people, and I think this is one of very important sections in the Buddha and His Dhamma, which brings out the personality of the Buddha in terms of his concern for the Sikh. And there is so much in this particular part of the book 8 of the Buddha and His Dhamma that it needs to be read again and again. So what I'm going to do, because it's mostly in the story format, I'm going to read the particular episodes and then going to talk about the teachings that are so prominently mentioned here in this particular part too. So let's begin reading it, and then I'm going to reflect some of the important issues that are emerging, and in terms of how we can practice when we encounter sickness or even death, for that matter. So it's a very profound sort of part, as I'm emphasizing again and again. So let's begin to look at by reading it thoroughly, and we will pause here and there to reflect on certain points which will be emerging as we read on. So part 3, his concern for the sick. And now at one time, a certain brother was suffering from dysentery and lay where he had fallen down in his own excreta. So this is a situation where a certain bhikshu or bhikkhu was suffering from dysentery, and he was lying, fallen down in his own excreta. And the exalted one, going on his rounds of the lodgings with Venerable Ananda in attendance, came to the lodging of that brother. So you see, here's a scene where the Buddha himself is going room by room to check what's happening in his in the Sangha. And he was accompanied by Ananda, and he came to the lodging where this brother who was suffering from the dysentery was lying in his own fecal matter or excreta. Now the exalted one saw that brother lying where he had fallen in his own excreta, and seeing him, he went towards him and said, "Brother, what else what are you suffering from?" "I have dysentery, Lord." "But is there anyone taking care of you, brother?" "No, Lord." "Why is it, brother, that the brethren do not take care of you?" "I am useless to the brethren, O Lord. Therefore, the brethren do not care for me." That's what the bhikshu said to the Buddha. Then the exalted one said to the Venerable Ananda, "Go you, Ananda, and fetch water. I will wash this brother." It's a very, very beautiful episode. It shows the compassion of the Buddha. So the Buddha is asking Ananda to go and fetch water, and I will wash this brother. "Yes, Lord," replied the Venerable Ananda to the exalted one. When he had fetched the water, the exalted one poured it out, while the venerable Ananda washed that brother all over. Then the exalted one taking him by the head, and the venerable Ananda taking him by the feet, together they laid him on the bed. Then the exalted one in this connection and on this occasion gathered the order of brethren together and questioned the brethren, saying, Brethren, is there in such and such a lodging a brother who is sick? That's the question the Buddha asked the whole assembly of the bhikshus. There is, Lord. And what else that brother? Lord, that brother has dysentery. But brethren, is there anyone taking care of him? No, Lord. Why not? Why do not the brethren take care of him? The brother is useless to the brethren, Lord. That's why the brethren do not care of him. That was the answer of the Sangha. Brethren, you have no mother and father to take care of you. You have no mother and father to take care of you. And if we will not take care of each other, who else, I ask, will do so? Brethren, he who would wait on me, let him wait on the sick. Now, this is the highest point in this particular teaching that the Buddha is saying. The episode is very clearly mentioned here that a bhikshu was fallen down in his own excreta because of the dysentery, and that must have made a horrible scene. Stench all over the places, and there was nobody to nurse him. There was nobody to take care of him, and the Buddha, along with Ananda, washed him, cleared him, and then after doing that, they laid him on a clean bed. And then after inquiring what has happened to the monk and why nobody is looking after him, the answer was that he was useless. And the Buddha says that, you don't have mother, you don't have father. It's you yourself have to look after each other. That is the teaching of the Buddha. But the Buddha goes one step further. And I think this summarizes the compassionate heart of the Buddha. He says, Brethren, he who would wait on me, let him wait on the sick. You see, so this can be looked at it as those who served the people who are suffering are ultimately suffering, serving the Buddha. So if we want to take refuge in the Buddha, if we want to serve the Buddha, if we want to look after the Buddha, if we want to tend the Buddha, if we want to take care of the Buddha, the Buddha himself said that you can do so by taking care of the sick people, by taking care of the deceased people, by taking care of the people who are undergoing through a lot of difficulties in their life. And I think this is the heart of the teachings which have been developed in the course of the Buddhist history, that putting people's suffering in front instead of putting ourselves first, putting other people first, has been a very quintessential teaching that has been emphasized throughout the history of Buddhism. And we see that it has culminated into a detailed teaching like Bodhicharya Avatar, like the lot of compassionate sort of aspects was emphasized, and the root of that goes to the Buddha. If we want to look after the Buddha, if we want to take a true refuge in the Buddha, we can do so by looking after those who are suffering, isn't it? So the Buddha cannot be separate from his inherent compassion. Of course, the Buddha is the awakened one, but that awakening comes by realizing that the human beings, the living beings, are connected with each other. There is no line of demarcation between the two human beings, and just like we will attend to the great beings like the Buddha, if we want to attend to the great beings like the Buddha, if we want to wait upon the Buddha says, you please wait upon the sick, the deceased one. And I think that is a kind of a teaching that we need today. And that's the clarity about what does the core of the Buddha's teachings constitute of. It constitute of looking after the people who are suffering. It constitute of tending the people who are undergoing a lot of difficulties in their lives. In other words, waiting on the sick. So this is a very profound teaching that the Buddha has given, and I'm going to read the verse number 20 again before I go on reading the verse number 21, which is also equally important. So, brethren, ye have no mother and father to take care of you. If you will not take care of each other, who else, I ask, will do so? Brethren, he who would wait on me, let him wait on the sick. And the verse number 21 goes like this: if he have a teacher, let his teacher take care of him so long as he is alive and wait for his recovery. If he have a tutor or a lodger, a disciple or a fellow lodger or a fellow disciple, such should take care of him and await his recovery. If no one takes care of him, it shall be reckoned an offense. Now, this verse number 21 is very, very, very important to cogitate over, to think over. That the Buddha says, it doesn't matter whoever you are, whether you are a novice, whether you are a senior, whether you are elderly, whoever you are, you cannot but look after the people, whatever is their station in life, isn't it? We have to look after them and we have to wait upon them. We have to await their recovery and we have to take care of them. Now, this is a very important teaching that the Buddha says there are two aspects to it. The one aspect is if we want to take refuge in the Buddha, if we want to serve the Buddha, the best way to serve after the Buddha, to look after the Buddha, is to look after or serve the people who are deceased or sick or who are undergoing difficulties in their lives. And it doesn't matter whoever they are, whether they are our teachers or students or friends or whoever they are, there is no consequence. Only the human connection is a consequence here. If the other human being is suffering, we should not we should not discriminate on any line on the basis of seniority or the basis of their stations or on the basis of whoever they are. It is but our duty to look after them. And I think these two verses as if captures the heart or the sense of the Buddha's teachings itself. So after this, I'm going to read this subsection 2, and it's also equally important. So once the Exalted One was staying near Rajagraha in the great Gruha at squirrels feeding ground. And on that occasion, the Venerable Vakkali was staying in the potter's shade, being sick, afflicted, stricken with a sore disease. Now, this is the old Vakkali who was a bhikshu, and he was staying in potter's shade. So you can imagine some kind of a shade where the bhikshu Vakkali is staying, and he is being sick, afflicted, and he's stricken with sore disease. So he's having boils on his body, he's suffering a lot. And now the Venerable Vakkali called to his attendants, saying, "Come hither, brother, friends. Go ye to the Exalted One, and in my name, worshipping at the feet of the Exalted One, say unto him, Lord, the brother Vakkali is sick, afflicted, stricken with a sore disease. He worships at the feet of the Exalted One, and thus do you say, well, were it, Lord, if the Exalted One would visit brother Vakkali out of compassion for him." So this is what Vakkali wanted. He wanted the Buddha to visit him, and because he was sick, he was diseased, and he told his attendant to go and call upon the Buddha to visit him. The Exalted One consented by his silence. Thereupon the Exalted One robed himself, and taking bowl and robe, went to visit Venerable Vakkali. So you see, the Buddha had any opportunity to go and look after his disciples, he will do it. This episode shows that Vakkali cannot move, cannot walk, and he wanted to see the Buddha. Therefore, the Buddha himself went to the person who is suffering. And there is also a teaching for us that we cannot wait, to visit the people who are deceased or sick. We have to just go and visit them. And now the Venerable Vakkali saw the Exalted One coming while he was yet far off, and seeing him, he stirred upon his bed. So now you see the scene that Vakkali is lying on the bed, and from his room, he is seeing from a long distance the Buddha is coming. And he stirred upon his bed. Then said the Exalted One to the Venerable Vakkali, "Enough, Vakkali, stir not on your bed. There are the seats made ready. I will sit there." And he sat down on a seat made ready. So the Exalted One sat down and said to the Venerable Vakkali, "Well, Vakkali, I hope you are bearing up. I hope you are enduring. Do your pains abate and not increase? Are there signs of their abating, not increasing?" So this is how the Buddha's way of inquiring. into the disease of Vakkali. And Vakkali was trying to get up to pay his homage to the Buddha. Buddha said, don't do that. Just lie on you, or lie in your bed. You don't have to get up and pay homage to me. And there are already seats here, and I can sit. And the Buddha is inquiring upon Vakkali thus, that he's hoping that Vakkali is bearing up, he's enduring, and he's asking whether your pain is abating or increasing, and are there any signs of abating and increasing. That's the inquiry that the Buddha made of Venerable Vakkali. No, Lord, I am not bearing up. So it's very difficult for Vakkali to bear up the pain, because once we are suffering from certain kind of disease or some kind of disease, which sometimes it becomes very difficult to bear it up and very difficult to endure. And strong pains come upon me. Strong pain comes upon me. That's what Vakkali is saying. They do not abate. There is no sign of their abating, but of their increasing. So my pain is increasing day by day. It's not decreasing at all. Have you any doubt, Vakkali? Have you any remorse? So this is what the Buddha is asking. That do you have any doubt in your life? Do you have any remorse? Isn't it? So Buddha is now knowing that the end of Vakkali is nearing, and the Buddha is asking him whether he has any doubt in his mind, so that the Buddha can clear it up, or whether there is any remorse, there is something heavy on his heart. Indeed, Lord, I have no doubt, I have no remorse. Have you not anything, Vakkali, wherein you reproach yourself as to the morals? So he said, do you have anything that you repent of having done something wrong? And nay, Lord, there is nothing wherein I reproach myself as to morals. So then, Vakkali, if that is so, you must have some worry. You must have something you regret. So the Buddha is saying that if your heart is light, it's not heavy with any sin, then it must be true that you have some worries or some regrets. So this is what Vakkali says. For a long time, Lord, I have been longing to set eyes on the Exalted One, but I had not strength enough in this body to come to see the Exalted One. You see, this is the faith. They said that Vakkali is an example of a faith. He has such a tremendous faith in the Buddha that he longed to set eyes on the Exalted One. He wanted to behold the Buddha by his own physical eyes. And that's what the Buddha wanted to do. That's what Venerable Vakkali wanted to do, to behold the Buddha by his own eyes. And that is what Vakkali wanted. So the Vakkali says, for a long time, Lord, I have been longing to set eyes on the Exalted One, but I had not enough strength in this body to come to see the Exalted One. Hush, Vakkali. So the is very beautifully explained. Hush, Vakkali. What is there in seeing this vile body of mine? Isn't it? See, this section or this part in the Buddha and His Dhamma is so important, and it's so, the Buddha is teaching as if directly as to how we should practice His Dhamma. It's a direct teaching. And it doesn't mean because it's coming at the end of the Buddha and His Dhamma that it has lesser value. It has the profound value because something has been now accumulated. It's like taking it to the higher level. What Baba Ambedkar has done it here. He says, Buddha says, hush, Vakkali. So Buddha is expressing, it's a disapproval. Hush, Vakkali. What is there in seeing this vile body of mine? He who sees the norm, the Dhamma, he sees me. He who sees Vakkali sees the norm. Verily, seeing the norm, Vakkali, one sees me. Seeing me, one sees the norm. You see, this is so beautifully explained. Just like what we have seen in the previous reading about he who would wait on me, let him wait on the sick. And here is a very profound, unique teaching where the Buddha says that, there is nothing in my physical body. So we can extend it further. We need the Buddha images. We need the various symbols to remind us of the great Buddha. But we cannot just be satisfied by looking at just the name and the form of the Buddha. What we need to do is to realize or see the Dhamma. So if we can see the Dhamma, if we can experience the Dhamma, we can see the Buddha. And we have seen in the previous classes that, seeing the Dhamma is also seeing Paticca Samutpad. So if we can understand this grand law of the Paticca Samutpad, we understand or realize the Dhamma. And when we realize or understand or we see the Dhamma, we see the Buddha himself. And this is what is all about, isn't it? So let me read it. The context of the story or episode is like this, that Vakkal is longing to see the Buddha. He is at his deathbed, as it were, and he wants to see the Buddha because that's the only thing he wanted to do now. And the Buddha says, what is this? You want to see this wild body of mine. What is there in this wild body of mine? Why would you want to see it? If you want to see it, you see the Dhamma. And if you can see the Dhamma, you see me. And who sees the Dhamma sees me. And that's like seeing me. So this is very beautiful. So let me read it again and again once more. Verse number 15. Hush Vakkali. What is there in seeing this wild body of mine? He who sees the norm, he sees me. He who sees Vakkali sees the norm. Verily seeing the norm, Vakkali, one sees me. Seeing me, one sees the norm. So this is how we can see the Buddha ourselves. Isn't it? It's not just about Vakkali, but if we want to see the Buddha, we have to practice the Buddha. And that's our Dhamma. And if we can practice, if we can see the truths as it is, if we can witness as it is, that's witnessing the Buddha itself. And witnessing the Buddha is witnessing Dhamma, witnessing the Dhamma is witnessing the Buddha. It's very beautifully laid out here. So I will proceed on reading again. And this is subsection 3. Thus have I heard, the Exalted One was once staying among the Baggi at Crocodile Haunt in Bhesakala grew in the deer park. Then the house father Nakulapita came to the Exalted One, saluted him, and sat down at one side. As he sat there, the house father Nakulapita addressed the Exalted One, saying, Master, I am a broken down old man, aged, for gone in years. I have reached life's end. I am sick and I am ailing, always ailing. This is the condition that we all reach when we become old. It's not just about Nakulapita. Moreover, Master, I am one to whom rarely comes the sight of the Exalted One and the worshipful brethren. Let the Exalted One cheer and comfort me, so that it be a profit and a blessing unto me for many a long day. So he says that it's very rare for me to see the Buddha and to see the Sangha. So please, you encourage me, you comfort me, you cheer me up, Lord, so that I can have a blessing unto me for a longer day. So true it is, house father, that your body is weak and cumbered. For one carrying this body about, householder, to claim but a moment's health would be sheer foolishness, because it's so frail. Nakulapita is so frail, so aged, so old. The Buddha saying that you to find even a single moment of health is a sheer foolishness, because that's the nature of the body. When we age, when we have disease, it's very difficult to find a sheer moment of health. And therefore, it said that when we are healthy, we should be happy, because this is the condition to be happy, isn't it? So even if we are healthy, we tend to suffer a lot because we long for so many things. But to be healthy is the greatest of the gifts, isn't it? And Buddha says that to be healthy is to really cheer up. But as we age up, as we grow old, we suffer all the time, isn't it? We all the time suffer, and our bodies are weak, and to find even a single moment of health, to expect it is a sheer foolishness. Wherefore, house father, thus should you train yourself. Though my body is sick, my mind shall not be sick. So this is the teaching. Here is a teaching, isn't it? Though my body is sick, my mind shall not be sick, isn't it? So our body has a nature to fall sick. Our body is going to wither away. There is no question of that. We are going to age. We all are going to die one day. But there is something remarkable here that the Buddha is teaching. And this is how we should train ourselves. And this is how we can confront the death and disease. That though my body is sick, my mind shall not be sick, isn't it? So what is expected here in this teaching is this, that we have to focus that our mind should not be diseased. And the Buddha also says that even if his body is withered away, his mind is still fresh, very vigilant, very strong, isn't it? So what we have to do is we have to, at some point of time in our lives, let go of the body, but we cannot let go of the mind, in the sense that the mind is a supreme, and we have to take care that our mind shall not be sick. So you see, within these few pages, there is the heart of the Buddha's teachings as to how we should practice the Buddha's teachings. So let's go to the final subsection, which is very important for us when we live our lives. Very important teachings here. So once the Exalted One was staying among the Shakyans at Kapilavastu in the fig tree park. So the Buddha is in the Kapilavastu among the Shakyans and in the fig tree park. Then on that occasion, a number of brethren were busy with making robes for the Exalted One. For said day, when the 3 months are over, the Exalted One, his robes being complete, will go forth on his rounds. So the Buddha is waiting for his robes to be completed, so that when the robes are done, he will take them and he will go for the rounds. Now Mahanama, the Shakyan, heard it, said, a number of brethren are busy with making robes and so forth, and he went to the Exalted One, saluted him, and sat down at one side. So seated, Mahanama, the Shakyan, said, I hear it said, Lord, that a number of the brethren are busy with making robes for the Exalted One, saying, when the robes are complete, at the end of the 3 months, the Exalted One will go forth on his rounds. Now, Lord, we have never heard from the Exalted One's own lips how a discreet layman who is sick, in pain, grievously afflicted, should be cheered by another discreet lay brother. So, important teaching. The Mahanama is asking a very pertinent question as to how one Upasaka will cheer another Upasaka who is sick, in pain, and grievously afflicted. Bear this in your mind, that the Buddha, that Mahanama is asking a very profound question. And the question is about how one person should look after another person, how they should cheer him up. And what follows is a very profound teachings of the Buddha on how to confront the sickness and death. So let us read it very carefully. And I'm going to gloss over some of the very important points that are emerging here, which are helpful to us every moment in our life. A discreet lay brother, Mahanam, who is sick, should be cheered by another discreet lay brother with the 4 comfortable assurances. So there are 4 comforts which gives us the assurances. Which are they? Take comfort, good sir, in the norm. Okay, so he has to take comfort in the Dhamma. Take comfort in the Sangha. And there is a Buddha is missing here. So let's put it there that we have to take the refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. So these are 4. And the 4th is very important. Likewise, in the virtues dear to the norm, kept unbroken and unsoiled, which tend to balance of mind. So 3 things that we have to take comfort in. One is the three sarana. And the 4th is very important in our own life of virtue, which are according to the Dhamma, which are kept unbroken and unsoiled, which tend to balance our mind. So if we want to balance our mind, if we want to have a calm mind, if we want to have a sublime, absorbing mind, what we need to do is we have to live in accordance with the norms, with the Dhamma. So these are the 4 things. So if we are deceased, or if anybody is deceased, how we should comfort them? We ask them, we cheer them up by taking refuge in the Buddha, by taking refuge in the Dhamma, by taking refuge in the Sangha. And the 4th one is to take comfort in their own unbroken and unsoiled way of life, which is in accordance with the Dhamma, which tends to balance of mind. So that's how they balance the mind. That's how we balance the mind, by practicing the Dhamma of the Buddha. So 4 things. So that's a preliminary, isn't it? Taking refuge and, taking comfort in one's own goodness is the beginning of how we go forth. Then Mahanama, when a discreet lay brother who is sick has thus been cheered with the 4 comfortable assurances by another lay brother, such should be the words of that other. So what should be the words after, these 4 comfortable assurances? 1, Suppose the sick man should have a longing for his parents. So, of course, when we are sick, we long for our relatives, we long for our parents. Then if the sick man says, I have a longing for my parents, the other should reply, my dear good man, you are subject to death. My good man, you are subject to death. Whether you have longing for your parents or not, you will die. So even when we are deceased, when we sure know that we are going to die, isn't it? And that's what it is. The Buddha says elsewhere that the death is like uh, uh, we cannot do anything when somebody is forcibly taken away from us, isn't it? And we have no, the death has no form. It comes and it destroys us from within, and we bodily we look the same, but we are dead. So when the death approaches, even if we long for our parents, isn't it that longing for the parents, the Buddha says, is unreasonable here, because we are going to die, isn't it? So it is where just as well for you to abandon all longing for your parents, isn't it? Sometimes we have this feeling that our parents will not let us die, will secure us. That's psychologically how we are brought up. And but the Buddha says that once you are going to die, you cannot find refuge in your parents or some kind of a savior figure, some kind of father figure. And suppose the sick man says that longing for my parents is now abandoned, then the other should say, "It, my good sir, you still have a longing for your children." And then we long for the children, as you must die in any case. It were just as well for you to abandon longing for your children. So the Buddha is saying that completely, slowly lightening up the mind, isn't it? Completely letting the mind be detached. So also should he speak in respect of 5 pleasures of the senses, because see, the word is created by our 5 senses. Whatever we see, whatever we hear, isn't it? It's a beautiful word that we see. The sounds we hear, the touches, so we long to remain in this sensual world, which is called the Kama Loka. It's a very enchanting world. It's a very beautiful world indeed, created by our senses. And also should he speak in respect of 5 pleasures of the senses, and we derive the pleasures through our senses. Suppose the sick man says, I have a longing for the 5 pleasures of sense. The other should say, my friend, heavenly delights are more excellent than the 5 pleasures of senses and more choice. It were well for you to remove your mind from human joys and fix it on the joys of the 4 great Deva kings. Now, here is a cryptic language. Okay, so there is a sensory world which is always there. When we open our eyes, we see the world through our ears. We listen to the pleasant sound, unpleasant sound, and through our tongue we taste. And these 5 senses create a beautiful word for us, and we long for that word, Kamatanna. This is called the Kamatanna, longing for this world of senses, the world created by the senses. And in Buddhist psychology, it's called the sensory consciousness. And when we begin to meditate, we try to cut our mind from this sensory consciousness and just try to come in contact with the mind, just expand our awareness, isn't it? By cutting by shutting the 5 doors. And when we do that, the sublime mental states begin to arise in our own mind. And that sublime mental states are called the heavenly abodes. And the Buddha is here saying that, instead of longing for the sensory consciousness, there is a higher level of consciousness which we attain by way of perfecting our mind in the absorption or in vipassana or in samatha with meditations. We achieve certain levels of consciousness. And the Buddha says that instead of dwelling there in that level of sensory consciousness, you can give that up, and you can begin to reside or stay in those stations of consciousness which are in traditional Buddhist terms called the Rupa Loka and Arupa Loka. And here the Buddha is progressively describing various subtle levels of minds here. So again, if the sick man say, my mind is so fixed, let the other say, better to fix your mind on the Brahma Lok, Brahma world. The Brahma Lok, Param Lok, is like a Brahma Vihar in the 4-fold sublime states, very, very highest form of the mental development. It has nothing to do with the Brahma. There are, according to the Buddhist cosmology, according to Buddhist psychology, there are all these states which can be realized by those who are trying to, focus their mind, who are trying to, absorb their mind, who are trying to detach their mind from the gross sensory experiences and bring very subtle consciousness, through their meditational practices. So that can happen here in this body, isn't it? It's not elsewhere. The Brahma world is not elsewhere, outside. It's here, now. My good sir, even the Brahma world is impermanent, not lasting, subject to personality. You see, this is the crux of the matter. You see, many people in the Buddhist, in the history might attain certain levels of consciousness, but here is a catch, which is captured here by in the verse number 11, that even these mental states, these dhyanic mental states, these mental states that we arrive at by cultivating our mind, even these mental states, according to the Buddha, are anicca, impermanent, not lasting, and subjected to personality. There is an ego sense, there is an atta attached to it, there is a feeling of I attached to it. And well for you, dear sir, if you raise your mind above the Brahma world and concentrate on cessation from the personal. Very beautiful teaching. This is the crux of the teachings of the Buddha. This section, if we can read only this section again and again, we realize how we can practice the Buddha's Dhamma in our day-to-day life. And this is what is the beauty of the Buddha and his Dhamma. You see, what the Buddha is teaching him, that, and this is a lay person addressing a lay person. This is so profound. It's not a bhikshu addressing a bhikshu. It is a lay person addressing a lay person, and profound teaching. What is the profound teaching here? He says that even if the world, Brahma world is, attained, it is impermanent. It is not lasting, and it's subjected to personality. And wherever there is a sense of atta, sense of I, sense of me, sense of myself, isn't it? There we are bound by suffering. And the Buddha says that it goes on up to even the highest levels of the mental states. Only way by which we can be free by concentrating on the cessation from the person. Cessation from the atta. In other words, realizing the atta. Most of the times in our meditation, we are so much focused on anicca. And it's right, because everything is impermanent. But what the Buddha says that, this is not enough. We should also focus on concentrating on realize that it's not self, anatta. And only when we realize that, we can seize the personal or atta, then only we are truly awakened, truly free. And if the sick man says he has done so, then I declare Mahanama, that there is no difference between the lay brother who can thus avow and the disciple whose mind is freed from the asavas. That's the only way by which our minds can be free from the bondage, by the cessation of the atta, or the sense of I, me, and myself. That is to say, so far as emancipation goes, and that's how the freedom goes. So let me take you through this last section again briefly, because it's very important to understand practices, how we can practice day-to-day life. It doesn't matter whether we're a bhikshu or whether we are a layperson. This is the highest teaching that the Buddha has given here in Kapilavastu to the Shakyans, when Mahanama asked him that if a layperson is sick, is deceased, how another layperson should cheer him up, should comfort. And progressively we can begin to realize that this is our own way of practice that is going to lead us to emancipation. So the Buddha says to the Mahanama that we should teach them the 4 comfortable assurances. What are the 4 comfortable assurances where there is a security? 1, taking refuge in the Buddha, taking refuge in the Dhamma, taking refuge in the Sangha. 3 refuges are comfortable assurances. And the 4th one is equally important, which is about, taking refuge in our own goodness. Isn't it? That we have acted according to the norms, according to the Dhamma. And because of that, our mind is in balance. That's how we maintain the balance of the mind. So this is the first thing. That's how we should practice. Even we should practice like this. We should take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. And we should take refuge in the way of life taught by the Buddha to live according in accordance with the norm, so that our mind is balanced. And the second way to cheer it up, that we have to give up the attachment. And one of the attachments that we have to rely on our parents all the time. And we do rely on our parents all the time because we find utmost security in them. And when we are deceased, we long to see our parents. But the Buddha says that, okay, that's okay, but you cannot, rely on them, because when we are dying, what is the use of waiting for the parents? Similarly with the children. So the Buddha is asking us to completely, detach our mind. And the Buddha is saying that then you can have a longing for the sensory world. The world around us is so beautiful. The world created by the senses is so beautiful, and our mind doesn't want to detach from this sensory consciousness, the sensory world, which is all around us, isn't it? The sights, the sounds, the touch, the tastes, all the things around us are so enchanting that, we don't want to leave this world. And he says, okay, you can leave that, because there is a better consciousness in terms of meditative experiences, or jhani consciousness, like the very sublime consciousness that we can attach. So we can give up this sensory consciousness, and we can progressively move on to attach to the attain to the highest level of consciousnesses, including the highest one, the supreme abode. But the Buddha says that, even that is not enough. Even there is a sense of I there. There is a sense of Atta there. So what we have to do, we have to ultimately, concentrate on the cessation from the personal. And when we do that, we are free. Our emancipation has now taken place. And this is the teaching that gradually we can all practice in our lives. So you see this subpart 3, his concern for the sick, is enough for us to live throughout our life. The first is, if we want to wait on the Buddha, if we want to take refuge in the Buddha teaches us to wait on the sick, wait on the deceased people, wait on those who are suffering. If we do that, we are actually looking after the Buddha. To the Vakkali, the Buddha says that if we can see the Dhamma, you can see the Buddha, isn't it? And to Nakulpita, the Buddha says that the body can be sick, but take care that your mind will not be sick. And in this final section of this beautiful part of the Buddha is teaching the gradual path to the awakening itself through our diseases and our eventual death. So we are all eventually going to die, but how we prepare for that stage of death is so beautifully communicated here, taught by the Buddha here in this last part. So I'll stop here, and we will open up for any reflections or anything that you would like to offer. As you realize that, these last sections of the Buddha and His Dhamma are becoming more profound, isn't it? As if, the Buddha, in the end of his life, he was concentrating his efforts on teaching very clearly what matters. Similarly, here in the last stages of the Buddha and Dhamma, you see the profound teachings that are appearing here, and so beautifully arranged by Baba Sahib Ambedkar that they make a direct sense to us. So anything by anybody?
Jai Bhim, sir. I have one doubt.
Yes.
Now, in this last section which we read, in verse number 9, there says, "Dware well for you to remove your mind from human joys and fix it on the joys of the 4 great Deva kings." So, is it like 4 Brahma Vihara we are talking here, or?
It's in the Buddhist cosmology, there are many levels of consciousness, right? So if we look at the Abhidhamma literature, there are many levels of consciousness, isn't it, that we attain through practicing the meditation, as it were. And like, for example, there is a Rupa Loka, and there is a Lokutta. So instead, we can look at this as, there are the Tawatims, and there is Tushita, and all these list of heavenly abodes that there are. but they are not outside there. They are inside here in the body. The Buddha, according to Buddhism, Buddha, the whole world is in the body, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and if we go further, read the Buddhist literature further, the body contains what the universe doesn't contain. Even some of the elements, they are in the body, which are there. So all the possibilities that of experience exist within this own body. So the great Deva kings here, four greater great, the four abodes that our human consciousness can attend to, can experience if we practice or cultivate, isn't it? So whatever we call it, great Deva kings, we call it Rupaloka, whatever we call it doesn't matter, isn't it? The point here is that there is a consciousness level which is not just confined to the sensory consciousness. You got it?
Yes, yes.
So the Brahmalok that comes up in the verse number 10 is the sublime mental state of four Brahma Vihar.
Yeah.
Metta, Karuna, Mudita, and Upekha. It's the highest level that one can attain to. But here also there is a sense of self, isn't it? There is a sense of I, and the Buddha is saying that wherever there is a sense of I, isn't it? A sense of Atta, sense of I, sense of me, sense of myself. We are not free. The only way we can be free by cessation from the personal.
Yes.
Isn't it? And that's where the Buddhism is so different from the other traditions, in a sense that the Buddha is not making the emancipation a personal affair.
Yeah.
Isn't it? So when we are free, our mind is not, that doesn't belong to us.
No.
It doesn't belong to itself also. So there is a riddle. Okay, anything else? If not, then we will end our class here. There is a lot to reflect on, and see you in the next class. Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya.
Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya.